And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Robert Glazer. He's a serial entrepreneur, an award-winning executive, a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, and a podcaster, amongst other things. He's currently the founder and board chair of global partnership marketing agency Acceleration Partners. And I can go on and on reading his bio, but I'd rather just talk to him because he's sitting right here. So welcome aboard, Bob. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So I want to, let's start with, you have used and continue to use thought leadership in a wide variety of ways, right? From writing books to Friday Forward to the newsletter to your podcast. I mean, you're doing it in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
How do you decide what formats to use and what to expect? Like, how do you make those decisions? Because there's lots of things you could be doing on any given day.
It's a little bit of experimentation. You know, we operated as a business, we operated in this kind of niche of affiliate and partner marketing. And I think we had a fundamentally different approach and disagreed with a lot of the norms of the industry. And so we get asked about stuff. And one of my tricks for content was always, if I get asked something 5 times, I'd be better off writing an article. And then the next time someone, and maybe backdating it, and then the next time someone asks me about it, like, this isn't new. We've covered this issue. Like, it's all right here, what you're asking about. Because when you're telling it to someone as a one-off answer, it sounds like you're telling them what you want to hear. I had the same thing when we started acquiring companies, and I got into the same crazy valuation conversations every time. I built a whole valuation chart and a whole thing. And when the 20th person gave me the same loony thing about what their company was worth, I'd say, look, there's actually an article and some information I put together a year ago. Like, maybe it'd be helpful to normalize around that. So I learned early on, like, we kind of picked a fight with the industry too, and threw a couple grenades into the model. And I think a lot of people resonated, with that. And so that led to kind of writing some of those marketing books and saying, why don't we just put our platform out there? Why don't we fundamentally think that the industry needs to change. We're doing something different and put it out there.
So stay there for a minute, because I like the idea, whatever industry or business you're in, if you're doing something that's different, which you should be, or contrarian, which maybe works for you or whatever.
Yeah.
Not just expressing that in a sales pitch or a meeting or conversations with the clients, but memorializing that in some form of thought leadership, article, short form video, whatever. I love the idea of saying, yeah, everybody's jumping on this bandwagon, but go back to 2015. I've been the grandfather of something, right? Or you have more, you're not someone jumping on a bandwagon.
Yeah.
You can point to a point in time, say, there's an idea that I actually started or was early on.
When any asked me, I was helping my financial advisor with this, was changing advice about, like, what content should I write? I want to do this. I'm like, what do people ask you about all the time that you have a great answer to, right? Wouldn't you want to increase the exposure to that to people who might be looking for that, who don't already know you? One of the things we used to get asked all the time was, like, look, if you're working on performance, can we just do it on performance? And I'd have 10 answers. Like, look, I could write up this agreement for you. It's going to have a 2-year tail. You're going to take it to your lawyer. They're not going to like it. Your finance team's going to hate it. And then you're going to come back and ask me for a retainer. So I've just, we've seen this movie before.
Cut out the middleman. Right.
Yeah. So that's where a lot of the content started, was generally as a response to, common issues. But when I wrote my first book, Performance Partnerships, I actually made, our industry affiliate marketing had a lot of naysayers. So I went with that. So it was 3 parts, kind of the past, present, and future. And the past was like, this has been some shady shit. We agree with you. And we actually share all your concerns, but there's a totally different way to do this. And let us show you how the best companies were doing that. So it earned some credibility by kind of starting with everyone likes a little self-deprecation.
Yeah, no, that's true. So again, you've got lots of different things, right? You're writing books, podcasting, you're speaking. Some of them are directly for dollars, some not. Yeah. How do you decide on where to spend more time and energy and where to spend less relative to your goals? So for example, keynoting is easy. If there's a fee that you want to get and you get it, and, whatever.
Yeah. And look, I think you need rules. And even in speaking, I can tell you kind of the rule that I've adopted. And that's, well, first is you got to kiss some frogs, initially. But I don't do anything free anymore. I have to travel. if I do, it's got to have a potential future audience that is like, considerably, there's 1,000 CEOs and it's local and I can go for an hour and possibly 100 of them want to have me then come to their company. But those are few and far between, because I find that when people don't have skin in the game, they overestimate the audience. They do a bunch of stuff. So if the primary value is for people to gain awareness of me, I'm willing to be flexible and do one of those events. If the primary value is for me to deliver value to the audience, I need to be paid in full for that, because there's no residual impact from that.
Right. And the paid in full is at a premium based on your reputation, how long you've been doing this and all that. It's speaking is one of those things where you'd never go to the dentist and say, can you check out this cavity? And if you do a good job, I check cavities all the time. I'll throw you the next one.
And I know it seems really glamorous, but I have kids that want to be around me now, and I see people doing 100 a year, and like it's like double your rate and do 50. Like obviously it takes a while to build that up, but if I have a mark that I want to be at that's worth my time. If I get 10 of those, great. If I get 4 of those, great. Like it doesn't go on sale.
So what about the podcast? Because that's something you've been doing for quite some time. You've got some great guests.
Yeah.
How does success for you on the podcast look like? Because I think people get mucked up in the
totally. So people do. Yeah. Like it's like, that if you sell 2 books on Amazon, you're in the top 50% or something like that. I think podcast is the same thing. I think most people don't get past like their second episode, and it actually rewards longevity. So again, 2 books ago, I did this whole podcast tour with some well-known people. And when I went back for my last book, half of them weren't doing their podcast anymore. And I think it's because they started their podcast for the wrong reason. They started it as an incubator to their business. They started it like it wasn't its primary mission. Mine is super simple. Like, I want to have an amazing conversation with someone who's incredible, who I can learn from and I can share. Like, so if that's the one conversation we ever have in life, then that's going to be like a great hour. Now,
but
there's a lot.
Not though, but isn't it usually a great way to either build or deepen a relationship by?
It's a great way to start a relationship. There's people who don't want to get a phone and chat with me, but they will come on my podcast, and then they see that I ask super thoughtful questions. I did my homework and research. It's organized. I marketed it. I send them a lead where someone says, "Hey, I heard on the podcast. Can I get Peter to come speak?" So then, if I want a testimonial on a book or otherwise. So that is a great way to connect to people and meet people who I've always wanted to have a conversation with, and I've built enough of a platform where it's valuable for them to do that.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said, in that there are zillions of people that won't necessarily take my call, but if it's behind a microphone,
you're doing something for them. Yeah. I mean, this is the reality of human nature. I always would say this in our business. I get calls all the time, right? That would say, "Hey, we provide X and Y services. I would love to connect with you and talk about how we can provide these services to your clients." Oh, great. I want to take a meeting with you to pitch services to my clients. That sounds super helpful. I had a 100% success rate when I would reach out to another firm and I'd say, "Hey, firm, you offer so-and-so. Our clients keep asking us for a vendor for this, and we don't do it. I'd love to connect with you and learn about how we might send you referrals." Do you think that person's going to take that?
Yeah, right.
that meeting? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, it's not ungenuine. I mean, but it's just the approach of like, "Hey, can you help me out, or can I help you out?"
Well, you're putting them at the center versus, "Hey, can I take your time so you can make me more successful?" versus, "Wow, here's a way we can make one another more successful, and there's a carrot for you right here." So
yeah, 100%.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave a 5-star review at ratethispodcast.com/LTL and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcasts and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. So what other thing, you've got the Friday forward. So how did that come about?
Yeah.
And what's the value to you in that?
That's so it came about because I started sending this note to my team after I went to a leadership thing that was about better morning routine and writing something positive, and we were given like chicken soup for the soul stuff. And that wasn't the type of positive that motivates me. Like I like something a little more spicy, chicken soup for the soul. And so I started taking these quotes and stories and things about leadership and personal development. And I didn't have the language at that time, but now what I call capacity building. And I started sending them every Friday to my distributed team. People started sharing them outside the company. Eventually, after a discussion with some other CEOs, I shared it with them. They started forwarding it to their company. And I was like, maybe other people would like this. And I kind of opened it up. 3 years later, 100,000 people in 60 countries had signed up, for this newsletter. Again, it's just about providing value to other people. Have I gotten tremendous value from it? Have I gotten speaking and clients and all kinds of stuff? Absolutely. But I don't sit there and be like, what would be a really good way to get a client from this? I try to create something that's valuable to someone else. And this is an example of doing something for the right reason. So every year there was a massive conference in our industry where the whole industry would be there. And a lot of people were on my Friday Forward. And I write a lot of industry content, how to launch your affiliate program, how to do this or otherwise. Every year I go to the party that they had that night and 5 or 6 people will come up to me and say, I love your Friday Forward. I love this one. No one talked to me about, I loved your 10 checklist thing. So even though it wasn't about work content, these were partners, people in our ecosystem, like key people who I had permission to be in communication with every week and share some value. And that's what they chose to come up and talk to me about.
And your name is familiar with them. It keeps coming up. And then you get to a point where there's a flywheel effect. And I don't think the thought would cross your mind now to say, well, it takes me an hour a week or 2 hours a week. I'm going to stop doing that.
Right. And early on, look, James Clear talked about this. Thought leadership and writing and this stuff, it just rewards longevity. And if you understand the compounding rule of 1%, you almost miss the hockey stick. It feels like crap, nothing. And then eventually the 1% compound. So all the people that have quit their blog and quit their podcast after they don't get what they're looking at of it out of 6 months, paved the way for the people. James Clear was like 6 or 7 years into his blog till some of his really old SEO pieces started taking off. And that's also a good reason why everyone should understand basic SEO who writes content and how to tag and title and try to write things that are evergreen and that will always be true.
Yeah. So I remember when I started blogging years ago, 15 years ago, I don't really like to write. On my best day, I'm a mediocre writer, but it needed to be done. And I went to a good friend of mine in Silicon Valley who at that point had 3 successful blogs. And he said, all right, Peter, you're like everybody else. You're an ADD CEO that wants to do, you want to hit send and then you want to click and see what the impact was and blah, blah, blah. Don't commit to writing 1 blog, commit to writing 100. And I was like, wow. And I actually
100%.
a week. And I was like, geez, all right. And you get to number 20, you get to number 30 and it's crickets. And I'm like, why am I? And you had every reason to justify this is stupid.
Yeah. It's like the organic law of nature where it just rewards persistence in some way.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then when so it wasn't necessarily exactly 100. We saw some early indication this was good. And then when we did the podcast 6.5 years ago, I said, all right, how about 50?
Yeah.
And same thing, the first 50 were like, okay, my next door neighbor downloaded it. He's an accountant. Thanks, but I wouldn't listen to your podcast on accounting if you had one, buddy, like whatever. And now it's become a thing, right? So I think that most people don't persist. Most people live in a short-term reward basis. There are places where thought leadership is a long-term play, a mid-term play, and a short-term play. And I think you have to understand where to place the bets and what.
And short-term is if you're the guy or the girl or whatever, and it's your space and your space blows up and it's hot and you're the thing of the moment, right? But that's like catching lightning. And I had a moment like that. We were a remote company for 15 years and we kind of hit it but we won all these best places to work awards, and then COVID hits and everyone's like, how do you do remote? And so I wrote a book in 3 months and it's all anyone would talk to me was about remote work. But that's catching lightning in a bottle.
Well, and that happens.
Yeah,
right?
It happens, but you can only plan for that by being the expert when your industry steps up onto stage, right? And so you can plan by being really good and being prepared, but it's hard to make your industry pop out of nowhere.
So what would you say to someone out there that's thinking about investing in thought leadership for their business to differentiate, to stand out from the competition, to punch above their weight, all the great things that it's for? What are the things that you would advise?
Yeah. I think pick a strategy pick a kind of angle, a tone, and then pick one channel and do that really well. I actually think companies struggle with this. Like when they
You say
try
one
to do,
channel, you mean one platform,
one platform. Like I'm going to crush Instagram and do it this way, or I'm going to write blog content, or because
yeah.
I actually find that when you build an audience with one, you can then leverage it to the other. Companies have this exact same problem. The ones that dive into all social media are not successful at any of it. Then you'll see ones that nailed Instagram or figured out TikTok or figured out videos. And then from that base, they were able to do the other channels. But if you don't have the resources and you don't have the team, I would go for the longevity, make a commitment. Like you said, I'm going to do 100, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and focusing on giving value to others, and pick one platform. Those would be my
don't call it thought leadership when it's really content marketing or product marketing.
You don't get to call yourself a thought leader. Other people can call you that, but it is never a self. There's no douchier thing than calling yourself a thought leader.
It is the douchiest of douches.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about for folks that don't know where to start? So you're saying pick one, so pick Insta or pick or whatever.
Pick LinkedIn, pick a newsletter, right? Yeah.
But I think that also assumes that you're really clear about who you're serving and who you like to serve, and make sure they're there, right? Because I've seen a lot of folks say, "Oh, I'm not doing video," and then you get down to it and say, "Well, why aren't you doing video?" I'm like, "Well, I don't like video." I'm like, "Okay, but you're marketing to this group and this group and this group, and the data shows us that they're consuming short form video. So if you don't show up there, you're not even an option." Like, how do you balance that out?
Yeah, just be something to someone. Again, it comes to the value. Like if you're a financial planner, again, think about the 3 or 4 questions you get asked a lot. Maybe prospects ask you, your best clients ask you otherwise, and figure out how you could deliver something that is a value and easy for people to consume, and do it on a regular enough basis that they get used to it, right? So, and again, figure out what your voice is and what your style is. If you hate video, maybe you write. If you hate writing, you do video. If you're good at making social media things, then do that. I mean, a lot of this is just based on what your proclivities are. I would try to play to your strength, and I would, again, always take the view of like, how is whatever I'm doing helpful to this other person? And because you're going to start with the people that you know, but your goal is for that content to move into the sphere of the people that you don't know, and that's how they get to know you.
Yeah, no, I think
if you want to write something viral, make something worth sharing. Like it's the thing that knows. Morgan Housel talked about this years ago, where he hired a social media consultant, and she gave him all these hacks, but never said like write really good content, which actually matters 10 times more than all these other things.
Yeah, I think that's right. And putting quality out there, making sure that the scarcest resource we have today, is not information, it's time. So whether you're going to get 10 minutes of my time or 2 minutes or 8 hours if I'm reading your book.
Can I give you a perfect example of this in a different context? So I have a rental unit out in Park City, and we built a website for it, and it gets some traffic and otherwise. But the way you get people to your website, you need more links, you need more referrals otherwise. So I thought about like, what would be helpful, to this? And over the years, people sent me tons of lists, like the best restaurant, and they're all this format and that format. So I spent like 36 hours collecting these lists, doing resources, building the biggest ultimate guide to everything you could ever want to do in Park City. And I just hung it off this rental website on another page, with an innocuous link to it.
Yeah.
And I shared it this morning with 200 people. The amount of connections I've already gotten of people like, we're going to add this. Can you put this on there? Oh, can you it's already like, because everyone's like, this is so good. We've been like, looking, I had a restaurant list, I had a whatever, like this solves a problem. So we're just going to link to it, give you stuff. And one guy hooked me up with reservations at his restaurant. But what did I do? I sat down, I spent hours trying to make something that would be really helpful for other people.
Well, but those other people, I think you have a sense of the need because you're also one of those other people.
Yeah, because it's so annoying to get all these different lists. And I'm like, just give me all the stuff in one place. And I couldn't.
Just to time out, this clearly we're falling into first world problem.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get a good reservation in Park City, but
fair.
but we'll work on solving some of the other things. But this is a problem that's been solved.
But it's a perfect example of like, honestly, I got super into it. It was fun. I spent an entire weekend. My wife was yelling at me, like, why are you on the computer? I was like, let me just finish this list. Like, I want to make this really good.
Is it more fun because you got the wife to yell at you and provided value? Like there's a matrix
that ups the ante. But it's a super simple example of creating content that goes viral because it's helpful to other people.
Well, and what I love about your example, viral in that instance is clearly lowercase v. That's never going to get 100 million hits.
Doesn't need to,
Small community of a couple hundred people that are in and out in Park City, that percentage of them that could rent your condo or whatever it is, pretty high, like pretty smart, pretty good, right? Because how many pictures of the mountain?
Yeah, and by the way, back to technical, the hardest thing for SEO, you can optimize your site. The hardest thing, one of the most important things, getting other people to link to you.
Yes.
And link to your content. So how do you get people to link to you? You write something that is linkable, right?
Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate your time and your candor and lots of good stuff that's gone back and forth here, Bob. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.